Hi everyone. Today I'm going to take you through the Diversity and Interdependence GRRR, the Global Regions Rev-Up Review. So if you could take just a minute to look at the definition of what diversity and interdependence means. What we're talking about here is the understanding and respect of yourself and others, including differences. So language, gender, socioeconomic class. This means this is the same as social classes or wealth. Okay, religion, any other things that make us who we are. It's closely related to interdependence. So this idea that we rely on each other and that we need each other for certain things. And so what we're going to look at today are examples of empires and locations that were very diverse and systems in which people depended on each other to get what they needed. Okay, so you're going to start by labeling the 7 continents and 5 oceans on this map. Hopefully you've been able to do that. If not, please pause this video and label those things. You can also find a map on the internet or in your textbook that can help you do that. And then we're going to draw an arrow to where each of these times of interaction occurred. So the first one is about the Muslim Golden Age. The Muslims were known for their diversity, and they conquered a lot of different areas, specifically in the Middle East. Mecca is here on the Arabian Peninsula, and at its largest extent, the area of Muslim influence extended out into here. So you could draw your arrow basically to the Middle East. Okay, so you're taking a look at the Middle East. Our next one is the Pax Mongolia. And the Mongols conquered the entire Silk Road. So again, they controlled a very diverse area, and just like the Muslims, they practiced religious tolerance. And so we can draw another arrow here to where the Silk Roads would have been, stretching across Asia. Same idea with the Trans-Saharan trade route, that across the Sahara Desert, people needed different things. So the Sahara is here in North Africa, and trans means to cross. So trans-Saharan, cross the Sahara. So why don't you go ahead and draw your arrow to the Sahara Desert. People who needed salt had the gold, and so they were able to trade that for what they needed in order to survive. And then the last one here, we may or may not have spoken about in class. It is the Columbian Exchange. And what this means is it's the exchange, the trading of goods, after Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So this is after 1492. And what happens here is that the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere start to trade. And what they do is they trade over the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so they trade over here, where products from the West start to be exchanged with products from the East. So the Eastern and the Western hemispheres start to interact with each other. So those things are going to be the base of what we do on this GRRR. So if we look down at the multiple choice, there are a few questions here, mostly about the Ottoman Empire and also the Ming Dynasty of China. Question number 2 is unique in that it has to do about Mali. Now Mali was involved in the Trans-Saharan trade route. And they came after Ghana. They were ruled by Mansa Musa and had converted to Islam. So if we know those things, hopefully that can help you answer the question. In terms of the first question, which factor contributed to the cultural diversity of the Ottoman Empire? We're looking for an answer that has something to do with being diverse. Now, if we've studied the Ottoman Empire already, what we would learn is that they had in their population Jews, Christians, Muslims, and they were in a location where lots of people would be able to pass through for trade or to try to take them over. And so you're looking for an answer that has something to do with where they were located, and that could really help them. Here in our next questions, these are about the Ming Dynasty, and we see this person, Zheng He. Zheng He was an explorer. He was someone who had huge treasure ships and he went out to try to get tribute states for China. So what that means is he went out and tried to get different groups of people to agree to send tribute to the Chinese, to show that the Chinese were superior to them and to make China more wealthy. So you want to be able to look for answers that have something to do with sailing, navigation, and gathering tribute from places. You may need to take a moment here to pause to answer those multiple choice questions, and then I'm going to move on to the document. So I'm going to go ahead and read this document out loud and annotate it as I go. So it says, the impact of Ottoman or Turkish rule upon all sectors of Balkan society was profound. Now, you may not know this, but the Balkans were in Europe. They're in southern Europe. It says, most of its aristocracy were killed though a minority was absorbed into the ruling class when, in keeping with the Ottoman practice, the Sultan took over their lands. Aristocracy is the wealthy group that had power. So what this is telling us is that a group of wealthy people who had been controlling the Balkans were either killed or taken in by the Ottomans to help them run their government when the Sultan took over. The Sultan is the leader of the Ottomans. In contrast, the peasantry who worked the land, paid most of the taxes, and were liable for military service were treated much better than before. Now I might wonder why. But when I look at what they did, so worked the land, paid most of the taxes, liable for military service, the answer is that they were very useful. And so the Ottomans didn't want to get rid of them. The aristocracy might have been a threat, but the peasants were useful. They were protected by the new landlords and had their feudal services abolished. So abolished means thrown out. They did not have to be loyal to their landlord anymore. Apart from the frontier regions, so these are the edges, right? Apart from the very edges of that area, most of the Balkans were spared that cultural and religious destruction usually associated with armies of occupation. So what this is telling us is that usually when one empire conquered another area, they would destroy what was there. This might remind you of the Mongols or Alexander the Great. They're two empires that destroyed things as they conquered, but the Ottomans didn't do that because they wanted to use what was available. They wanted to use the workers and use the land. Christians, though encouraged to convert to Islam, were allowed religious toleration and mixed marriages, and the comparative freedom and contentment enjoyed by its people is one of the most important explanations why the Balkans remained under Ottoman rule for over 400 years. So they're able to practice their religion, and what that means here is they're saying why the Balkans remained under Ottoman rule. It's telling you that the people there didn't rebel because the Mongols treated them very well. That might remind you of previous Muslim empires we've looked at, including the Abbasid dynasty. So I'm going to move this screen now. Again, if you need a moment to pause the video with the annotation so you can answer the questions, please do that. And I slide down to these two areas. So outside information, you should take a look and see if you made any connections here. I was able to make some connections to Alexander the Great and the Mongols. That would count as one piece of outside information. You can come up with some others. And then how does the topic of this source connect to what you are currently learning? So this will depend on what unit you're in class. But you want to think about your grapes categories. Do you see any similarities between what you just read about the Ottomans and what you're learning in class in terms of the geography, in terms of the religion, their achievements, their political system, their economic system, or their society, their social classes and women. It might be the opposite, it might be the same. But see if you can connect to what you're learning in class. Feel free to use your notes. Thanks, everybody.